Well, hello friends. Boy, that was quick. Thank you for joining me again. My name's Dan. Maybe you know that already. And this is Daily Art Adventure number 793. Maybe you know that too. For those of you who are keeping count better than I am. Coming up at the end of 2019. Can you believe it? Oh my goodness. I remember when Christmas used to come just once a year. And it took forever to get here. Now it happens about every 4.5 months and rolls over you like a steamroller. I'm not really complaining. Anyway, thank you for joining me again. This is sit on my butt kind of drawing. Woohoo! Kind of always a nice change. I spent most of my illustration career, if not doing watercolor, then at least always within shouting distance of watercolor. If that makes any sense or not, but I did a lot of watercolor as an illustrator. I was a watercolor major, I guess I would say. They didn't call me that, but that's basically what I was in college. You know why I ended up as a watercolor major? Because back then in the early and mid 70s, this kind of newfangled stuff called acrylics had just come out, and most of my professors, it seemed to me, were completely gaga about abstract painting. Abstract, that's not what I mean to say. They were completely gaga about acrylic paints, which made a lot of sense because most of them were, roughly speaking, abstract expressionists, roughly speaking. And so, in my opinion, acrylics are like the perfect medium for abstract expressionist painting. Anyway, and so I was dutifully trying to, you know, do what everybody was doing and doing acrylic paintings in my early painting classes. But dang, I was one of those. I hate to say that this has been a much too recurrent theme in my life, but I was one of those broke college students. You know, I didn't have. I could rub 2 nickels together most of the time, and so I proceeded to water down my acrylic paints again and again and again and again. The longer I painted, the waterier they got. So I turned into a watercolor painter by default because I turned my acrylics into watercolors, which you can do, by the way, and is a fine option. It really is. Nothing wrong with that. No deleterious effect. You just can't. They do behave like watercolors in many respects. Not in anyway. Then I switched over to real watercolors, you know, by about, say, my 2nd semester of painting class. Anyway, so I ended up being a watercolorist. Almost all of my artwork in my senior show were watercolors. Anyway, all that is nothing to do with anything except that I've got to blather on about something while I'm drawing or painting. You see me here sitting with a drawing with a lapboard. That's what I mean to say. Are you familiar with the lapboard? You should be. It is well, the 2nd cheapest easel in the world. Let me show you the cheapest easel in the world. You ready for this? There it is. Clipboard. And when you're sitting down, now a legal size clipboard, it's about 3 inches longer. You can tell I've used this as a paint palette. That happens to things around here. Anyway, that's the cheapest easel in the world, right there. $1.95 maybe for a palette at Walmart. I mean, for a clipboard. at Walmart. And and you put paper on it. That's cheap easel, right? Well, if that's the cheapest easel in the world, then this right here, a lap board, a whole lot nicer because it's bigger. You can fit bigger painter. You fit bigger. You can fit bigger paper on it. You can lean back further. And I will graduate to this grip, at some point, the traditional death control grip, that's appropriate at some point, but it's not very good for the early stages of painting. Oh, okay, so since I've gotten this deep, okay, real quick, this grip and this angle do not work. There's a symbiotic relationship between the way you hold your pencil or writing utensil and the angle, the plane that you're writing at. Okay, forgive me, I didn't know I was going to get into this, but this is a review for most of you. Just when you draw like this, which is frankly the way most of us grew up drawing, right? Because we grew up in school, right? And we were sitting in math, history, civics, English, government, whatever class, science, biology, geometry, and what are we doing? The artists. We're sitting in the back row drawing. Are you with me? While the rest of you whiz kids are getting A's, the artists are in the back row developing skills, and we're drawing like this, just like this, right? All right. The problem with this, not that we didn't all do it. The problem with it is this plane is pointed at the ceiling, and it's even at an incline, sort of like a school desk, but it's pointed at the ceiling. So when I draw like this, I'm demanding my brain, I'm asking my brain to do a very complicated calculation to compensate for the angle that I'm looking at the drawing surface at an oblique angle, right? So simply by turning it like this, now, and I'm even being such a bad boy, I don't know if you can tell, I'm actually leaning back on the back legs of my chair. And if there's any mothers out there, shut up. I don't want to hear about it. You're not my mother, and she's not watching right now. So I'm leaning back in my chair, and I've got this pointed at my nose, or my eyes, if you will. And I'm holding the pencil in the what I call side saddle grip, right? And these things work together. So the side saddle grip does not work at this angle. This works, and I'll be doing this later. That's about what I call my detailer control grip. I'll do that later, but it's really not good for the initial drawing. Oh boy, here we go again. And I've had several people over the years challenge me on that, and it usually goes something like this. Well, I went to Chicago, and by the way, the Chicago Institute of Art, excellent school. Excellent school. And they usually say, my professor, Bob Wachahachi, he was a fantastic drawer, and he never held his brush that way, or pencil. Well, boy, okay. You asked for it, here goes. Yeah, well, Bob Wachahachi was a crackerjack drawer, he really was. But he would have been better if he'd held his, because if he's drawing like this, then he's got to compensate. Anyway, and there are people that can do all kinds of things the wrong way and still do them amazingly well. But I will stand mostly on the ground that by far, most of the really good drawers in history, I'm convinced if Rembrandt showed up in my office studio right now, he would look at my hand and go, yep. Plus, anyway, never mind. That's enough. I verge on sounding arrogant here, and I just don't even want to. I am arrogant, but I don't want to sound it. Shut up. You ain't my mom, and my mom's not listening. Well, maybe she is listening, but she does listen once in a while, my sister, pulls up my YouTube channel for her. Hi, Mom. Love you. Look forward to seeing you in a couple days. Christmas. Hey, did you notice I am wearing my Christmas shirt? It's not even Christmas. It's a week till Christmas. And I'm wearing my, can you see it? Red and green. Want to know a funny story about this shirt? I know you do. That's why you watch my commercial. I mean, that's why, that's why you watch this commercial, is for the funny stories. It's not really that funny, but here it is. This shirt, we moved, my wife and I and two bitty kids, 7-month-old and 1.5-year-old. We moved from Minnesota to Fort Worth, Texas in 1984. And I already owned this shirt at that time. I should really be embarrassed, shouldn't I? I am wearing a shirt that I bought. Now, the only reason I know that, pretty much the only reason I know that, is because I went to work for an organization and as an artist and a writer. How about that? I was an artist and a writer and a speaker for this organization, and they were producing a video at the time. Remember videos? And they wanted, in post-production, at one point, they used my hand in the video, just a shot, close-up of my hand. And guess what? I was wearing this shirt. That's the reason I know I've had this shirt that long, because I just remember that video shot. Anyway, isn't that funny? So how many years ago was that? 35. This shirt's 35 years old. Now, in all defensiveness, let me tell you that part of the reason it's lasted this long, well, it was good quality, but I don't wear it all that often, right? Because it's kind of like Christmas colors. So I wear it, 3 times a year, maybe 4. There. I know, that was just made your day, all of you, to learn that I'm wearing a 35-year-old shirt. I think I know some people who would be mortified to wear a shirt, to wear any piece of clothing that's 35 years old. And I'm such an old fart that I'm probably supposed to be embarrassed myself. It's probably way out of style, and I just don't know it. And that's all right. My mom's not watching. Yuck, yuck. All right, let's talk about art, shall we? You know the drill. Well, some of you do anyway. My first drawing was in a very, very, very pale color, yellow. Second drawing was in slightly darker, yellow-orange. What do they call this? Orange. And when I did the orange, the yellow essentially disappeared, psychologically disappeared. I can still see it, but I don't pay any attention to it. So I'm going to continue that. Now, at this point, I get to decide what color to do next. If I just continue around the color wheel, it would be red next. But I might want to do a fuchsia color-ish color. What do they call it? Purple? That's funny. That look like purple. Or I could do violet. Or I could go the other way and do green or blue. Okay, stop talking for a minute. Let me think. I call this I say stop talking and I keep going. The guy just won't quit, will he? Hello, Michael McEwen. Hello. Oh boy. Hanaka Zabo. Hanaka Zabo. Eastern Europe, I'm assuming, right? And I know I'm probably butchering your name. I'm Nauka. Nauka Zabo. We have some friends named Zabo. Hungarian? And Barbara. Good to hear you, Barbara. I'm always honored to have you watching me. It's really fun when good artists watch me. And you guys have kind of turned into what's the word? Accountability, or you critique my work while I'm doing it. And I got to tell you, more often than not, you're doing a really good job of giving me critique. All right. So the next, I call this my watercolor sketch. So not to be confused with like a legit or serious watercolor technique. This is not, I can cheat any way I want to, but I've developed this little technique, and it works well for me. These are watercolor pencils, of course, so when I add water to this, they're going to bleed and run and stuff, which is part of the charm, I think, of this technique. Now, here's the image. It's a decidedly cool photograph. The sun is warm, but the shadows are cool. There's more shadow than sun, so it's at least the photograph is cool, and I need to decide whether I want to stick with that or not. Okay, I don't know. This is a commission, by the way. I'm doing a quick little, not being paid a lot, so that's not a complaint, by the way. Ryan, if you're watching, I sent him a price list, and he followed my price list. It's a Christmas gift for somebody. Okay, next color. Let me just pull up some what I think are the prime candidates for this. I would call this fuchsia. They call it purple, but that's really crazy to me. And then iris blue, whatever that means. It looks like a warm blue. Yeah, I don't want to go green. Or I could go red. No, I don't want to go red. That's too close to what's already here. All right, so I think it's one of these two. I think I'm going to go blue. Okay, now I have two blues here. Let me pick which one I really want. Yeah, this one's, I want a cool blue or warm blue. That is greenish or purplish blue. We've talked about that quite a bit. There's a lot of confusion out there about which blue is warm or which blue is cool. I'm not going to repeat it, except to say yellow-orange, in my opinion, and on my channel, my opinion's right. Until the end of this broadcast. Hey, Katie. Yeah, I'm wearing a vintage shirt. That's in, isn't it? That's cool. Vintage shirt. Thank you for that recommendation. I think you're right. All right, I'm going to go with the warm. All right, here. Okay, I said I wasn't going to do it, but it's right here in front of me. Here's a color wheel. I'm going to give you my color theory real quick. Red and yellow are both warm. Here's orange. Therefore, orange is warmer than either one of these. But are red, all things being equal, are red and yellow equally warm? And I would say no, that yellow, generally speaking, is slightly warmer. So I say yellow-orange is, put it at true north. That's the warmest color, in my opinion, which, till you stop watching me today, this is the correct opinion. So every other color is warm or cool in relationship to that. Does that help? So the coolest color then is a blue-violet, or ultramarine blue down here. So therefore, a blue that has green in it, see, it's getting closer to this. So a blue that tends toward cerulean, phthalo, blue-green, that's a warm blue, and the coolest blue is straight down here. All right, that's enough of that. We've done that so many times. So I'm just about ready to start drawing this way, but not quite. I'm going to switch where you guys are, your camera, in just a few minutes to another angle. I'm thinking, no, you know what? I think I want to do it now. So, all right, so I'm switch grips now from, if forced, if you put a gun to my head and say, define your terms, then this is what I would say, that the grip I've been using up until now, which I often call the side saddle grip, I would call that my sketching grip. If you forced me to make a distinction, okay, I would call that sketch. And what I'm doing right now is drawing grip. Again, that's if you really. Uh-oh, this lead is broken. Hang on. If you really forced me, the proverbial gun to the head. Proverbial, not literal. Muddy color can be either cool or warm. Either one. There's no distinction. Whoops. Now it's time for the glove, right? So I bought real cheap, like a bag of 30 gloves or something for $5 and cut off all the fingers except the pinky. That's to protect the paper, not to protect my fingers from the dangerous toxins. No, 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 no. By the way, one of the things that I did in preparation for this is in Photoshop, I edited this photo so that it was exactly the same ratio. This is 8 by 10. So this is, it's not the same size, but it's exactly the same ratio. That really does help. And I have forgotten to do that many times in the past, and it has come back to bite me. When you find yourself in transferring a drawing or a painting from a photo to, and then come to find out it's not the same ratio, and you've been influenced by the ratio. So I did not make that mistake this time. This is, I mentioned, this is a commission for somebody who found me online. It's somebody local here, so I think it's somebody who's familiar with my work, which would mean mostly they're familiar with my oil paintings. Anyway, this is a house that evidently he grew up in, and as I understand it, it's a Christmas gift for his parents, if I remember that correctly. So, isn't that sweet? I think that's really, really special. So yesterday I jumped in my van, zoomed downtown to the neighborhood, old, well-established neighborhood in downtown Raleigh, and took a bunch of pictures, edited them, sent them to my client, said which one do you like, so on and so on and so forth. We went back and forth and so forth. So delighted. This is honestly, I can do quote unquote legit watercolors. And again, every once in a while I do one, just sort of the way I do super realistic oil paintings every once in a while. By the same token, every once in a while I'll do a real, so to speak, a real watercolor painting, just to keep my chops up, I think. This technique is definitely become my default setting. I developed this, I don't remember when, but I know I did a video for Jerry's Artorama about 10 years ago where I was demonstrating this technique. So I know only because of that, I know that I've been doing it for at least 10 years. And it didn't feel particularly new to me at the time, so evidently, as an illustrator, I must have. Part of the charm and the beauty of it, three things. One is drawing in progressively dark colors is a really good trick that applies to many mediums. You can do the same thing in painting. You know, do it when you draw with your brushes sometimes. I'm assuming you all do that at times. Draw with a light color, then a darker and a darker and a darker, especially when you're working in acrylics where each layer dries quickly. I went through a season where I did that quite a bit. So it's a technique that works well. Secondly, so that's one, it's an aid to drawing. It's a trick for achieving accurate drawing fairly quickly. Secondly, that when I add water to this is all watercolor pencil, you understand. When you add water to it, it all blossoms, mushrooms, you know, the colors run, which normally that would be a bad thing. If you're an early journey painter, you don't want things happening that are not under the iron boot of your control, right? So there we go again. But once you enter the second half of your art journey, you go, oh, wait a minute. things happening by accident are actually often very superior to things that you forced to happen by your iron will, so to speak. So that's a big, in my book, a big part of the charm of this technique is the fun accidental things that happen when I add water to this. Oh, hang on, I am getting static now. There we go. I am so sorry, folks. I had static earlier this afternoon, and it was the fault of my monitor. And now, anyway, sorry about that. You've been putting up with all that noise. Did anybody say anything? Uncle 60, again, you asked a very good question about, is there a relationship between color, temperature, and mud? And I've mentioned several times that that's what Richard Schmid in his book, which I am still wading through. That's not a very spectacular, what's the word, recommendation for his book, is it? I like Richard Schmid's painting a lot. I paid $140 for his book. Whew. I was talking to my friend Dan Beck. You Google him, Dan Beck. He lives in, he's a bona fide big dog painter. OPA master. He won the, the whatever they call it, championship at OPA twice, not once, but twice. That's almost unheard of. And he moved his little self all the way to North Carolina some years ago. Anyway, so I was visiting him in his studio, and the subject of Richard Schmid came up, and he said, yeah, that book's blah, blah, blah. He didn't have not good have things to say about the book, which then made me go, oh, man, maybe that's why I'm having a hard time getting through it. I don't know. I still love Richard Schmid's work, so. But maybe his book isn't that good. I don't know. Anyway, I'm sorry. Boy, do I ramble on. He says that mud is a function of a misuse of temperature. Now, I think he's wrong, but maybe it's because I just don't understand. Anyway, so I'm just saying that in answer to your question somewhat, Uncle, that, yeah, Richard Schmid, and who am I to argue with him, says that it's a misuse of temperature. Nonetheless, I disagree, as you well know. Uncle, I got to admit, I had a little bit of live streaming on just this morning when I was kind of getting set up, getting geared up to paint and broadcast, and I had some of the hearings going on, and you know what I think? Most of us, myself, at the front, I turn off the TV, turn off the news, turn off the whatever kind of broadcasting is coming to my brain, and you know what? Life is really good. The sun's shining, my neighbors are friendly. We are, and my neighbors are red and yellow, black and white, by the way. We have a very integrated neighborhood. And all is well. My wife loves me. Our kids are wonderful. I'm in good health. And then you just start watching the national news, and a cloud comes over your inner person, like, so most of the time I'm just better off, but that's hilarious. Paint the impeachment hearings. Oh, I dare not even breathe anything. I'll be triggering half my audience if I just take a position one way or the other on the subject I'll be alienating half my crew. And believe me, I'm able to go there. That is funny. Kind of like a court reporter artist, you know, which I've often thought, man, how do you get a job like that? That would be fun. I would love that. There you go. Right, now the question is, well, several questions. One is, have I accurately enough rendered this? I think I have, although hang on. I'm glad I thought about this. Let's do a check. Boy, I am notorious for making things not vertical. That's one of my best stupid tricks is having vertical things leaning. I'm pretty close, I'm glad to say, but no, I'm just enough off that I'm glad I checked this. I tipped and I should be able to correct this, because I think most of the time my images, and this doesn't happen when I'm standing up, by the way. That's a huge vote for why we ought to paint and draw standing up. This is something that only afflicts me when I'm sitting down, so there you go. Anyway, my lines tend to go in is it oblique? Anti-italic. The opposite of an italic lean. My things tend to lean to the left. It happens badly enough that sometimes, boy, it's caused me troubles. It makes me wonder if I have some kind of, mental astigmatism or something. Be that as it may, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it, but I am glad I thought to pick up make a few corrections here. You guys like my Christmas music playing in the background? I like it. This is part of, again, the music that you hear. I don't know if you can hear it or not. I think you can barely. It's part of, I pay a monthly subscription to Epidemic Sound, and I'm quite happy with the arrangement. I get to play their music. They have thousands, tens of thousands of pieces of music to choose from, and you can search based on all kinds of parameters. Uncle, you asked me the other day, do I ever play to like loud, energetic rock music? And the answer is virtually no. Evidently, I just say this sort of in hindsight, evidently I don't need to be revved up to paint or to draw. I'm revved enough, I think, and usually I want something calm. So that's why almost always the music you hear, if you can hear it at all, the music behind me is pretty calm. Let me show you the photograph again. And I had no idea when I was heading downtown yesterday morning, what kind of lighting I would find. But behold, look at it. It's actually pretty good lighting because it's oblique coming from the side. By the way, but there's a tip. Painters, artists, listen. Most of the time you want sunlight coming from the left or the right. Very rarely do you want it coming from the direction you're looking. Very rarely do you want it right behind your back. You want it left or right. So here we are. It's good. So I've got a lot of dimension. The other thing that's working really well in this image is I've got these lines of shadow. This is a little bit much. I'll diminish that. But these lines are nearly perfect because you know what I say, right? No, some of you don't. Okay. Anytime you're painting, and especially this applies to painting buildings, you have a flat plane. Put your left hand on your heart, lift your right hand and say, I do solemnly swear that I will never paint a flat plane flat ever again. So help me God. Okay, you put a shadow at an angle. Now, this is great because it's actually already in the photograph, so I don't have to make it up. It's actually there. Likewise, the shadow here on the side of the house is really nice. And here, it's really nice. So there's some nice things about the photograph. It's like I just lucked out, you know. I didn't know which way this house was facing. I just happened when I got down there. It was working well. Oh, okay, another quick. 2 things. Why I like painting in the wintertime. Number 1, because the leaves are off the trees. See this sapling thing right here? If this was summertime, there'd be a big blob of foliage right there, and I wouldn't be able to see through it. But now, I can see easily through that bush, and I can add as much foliage to that as I want. The second thing that's an advantage of painting in the winter, at least, again, I'm talking in Northern Hemisphere, Southern Hemisphere, same thing, but just the other time, the opposite time, is that in North Carolina, in midwinter, the sun never gets real high in the sky. So almost any time of day, the lighting is pretty good for painting. Does that make sense? Because it's low in the sky. It's even lower, of course, north of me. David up in Quebec. I mean, you guys can barely see the sun in the middle of the winter. That's a joke. But, but the light is good all day long because it's never right overhead. Anyway, so just something to keep in mind. As artists, we're really not that disappointed to see wintertime comes because it helps us in our plein air painting. All right, now back to the job at hand. Uncle, you're exactly right. Muddy temperature depends on the color next to it. You're exactly right. And you're also such a thing. Freedom is being able to watch such a thing. You're exactly correct. Hello, Monique. Good to hear from you again. I swear, so help me, Dan. That's what I meant, really. That's hilarious. You know what? I'm going to do a little bit indication of some of these shadows while I talked about it, and I don't always, you know, draw in shadows, but I think I will this case. It's so critical. All right, at this point, I have a decision to make. Either I draw again with another color, and in this case, that color I think would be purple, but I don't think I really need, I think I'm detailed enough. I don't think I really need to do that. I'm just putting some purple on the paper so that it bleeds a little bit when I add water to it. Speaking of which, I'll do the same thing with some red. Right. Now, okay, at this point, now I have a decision. Either I can start watercolor painting right now, or, yep, I'm gonna do the or, which is pen and ink. Okay. You guys ask periodically, what kind of pen is it? I got it at Jerry's Artorama, and I have done a fair amount of experimentation about fountain pens. You know, back in the olden days, back when I was an illustrator, I'll just show you, I used to use rapidograph pens to do this kind. Oh no, look what just happened. I just dropped a drop of ink on my paper hand. Don't worry, it's not as big a disaster as it looks like. Boy, that was bad, wasn't it? Anyway, I used to draw with rapidograph, but I have graduated to preferring fountain pens because, well, let me demonstrate, because you can get a variety of stroke. Let me zoom in real tight here so I can just demonstrate. Yep, lots of pressure, little pressure. See the difference between that heaviness and that heaviness? So what that does is it gives me an expressive stroke. I get thick and thin lines, which is much more expressive than say, a rapidograph pen. And that pen just quit working, so I'm glad oh yeah. Okay, well that gives me a chance to show you the ink. It goes with this pen, Here it is right here, cleverly named Pen and Ink Sketch. That's the name of the pen, and that's the name of the ink. I'm being facetious. I'm being fallacious when I say Pen and Ink Sketch. What a terrible name, but you know, it was a bunch of Chinese people that came up with it, so what can I say? That was supposed to be funny. It was not at all serious. True, but not serious. All right. I have nothing against Chinese people. In fact, my heart goes up to them quite much because I have tons against their government, but nothing against the Chinese people themselves. Okay, so I'm going to refill this reservoir. It's a nice, pretty typical for fountain pens, you know, in the last 15 or 20 years that they operate in this manner. So it's a plunger system that goes up and down by twisting this. Whoops, let me back out a little bit. I'm off camera, aren't I? Okay, so you twist this and this plunger pulls back and pulls up the ink. And then, to make sure it's going well, you hold it over the bottle and squeeze till a drop or two of ink comes through the tip, the nib, right? So there you go. And this says non-shellac, which is pretty important, because that means this ink probably won't dry up and clog your pen, which is one of the biggest challenges of fountain pens, is that when the nibs get clogged. So I'm going to start drawing. By the way, I'm back to the artist's grip, if you'll let me call it that. The expressive grip, the sketching grip. In spite of the fact that this isn't pointing at my nose, right? So what I'm doing right now is sort of a hybrid between the control and expressive. You know, I talk so often about how to hold a brush, how to hold a pencil, and so forth. And what I'm doing right now is sort of halfway between. That's why I've got the paper flat on the desk, etc. All right. As you might expect, if you've been paying any attention, I'm using the ink lines. As you might expect, I'm using them to render, to draw, to accomplish a degree of realism or similitude, right? Having said that, however, you regulars know, right? But which is more important, the accuracy or the feel of the marks themselves? And of course, the answer is obvious. The essence of good drawing, just like the essence of good painting, is making interesting marks. And that's part of the reason why I'm holding the... Now, I'll switch over to this whenever I feel like it. Especially if I were to do some cross-hatching, I would switch to that grip. All right, you've seen me in the last couple of minutes, you've seen me do two crazy marks, right here and right there. That is very hard to describe. How do you know how to do that? I've tried to describe it so many times, and I usually say something like, I give my hands permission to periodically to make marks without my permission. I know that literally, technically speaking, that does not make any sense, but that's the best way I have to say it. It's as if there's a timer built into my hand that after a certain number of minutes, the same thing applies to my painting, of course. After a certain time has passed by and I feel the timer goes off, the alarm goes off, the alarm says, eh, eh, eh. Is that a good alarm? The alarm says, you've been painting or drawing, in this case, in much too careful, fastidious is one of my favorite words. You've been painting and or drawing in much too fastidious a manner for several minutes. Therefore, my hand says to me, without my permission, therefore, we are going to have a little seizure. And it's so weird because honestly, like right now I'm thinking about it very much because I'm talking about it. And this is so weird, but if I force it, if I try to do it like pre-planned, if I think about it and do it like, by golly, I think this will be a good time to do one of those random marks, it just doesn't work. It's so crazy. So I'm sorry that this is one of those cases where the fact is, and this was a big growth learning moment for me in the last year or two, that it turns out that my hands actually do have, that I actually do have skill in my hands, which I've spent decades decrying that notion. I've made a tertiary career of saying no. An artist's skill is in his head, not in his hands or his or her hands. But in the last couple years, I've had to go, oh, you know what? It's not entirely true. It's essentially true, but it's not entirely true. The fact is, my hands actually do have skill in them. And it's a bit disingenuous for me to deny that fact. Anyway, so that's what this is. My hands doing things on their own, like that right there, is an evidence of the skill that my hands possess. And I have to let go of my analytical left brain domination of the process and let my hands do some things, as I call it, without my brain's permission. Yeah, Susan, you say the random marks have to be a Zen thing. I mean, it's exactly right. It's my language fails. I don't exactly know how to describe it, but so it is kind of a, I don't know. It's a crazy, spooky, weird, subconscious, unconscious, transconscious thing. And I'm serious when I say if I plan it with my head, it just doesn't come off convincingly. It looks contrived, artificial, blah blah blah. All right, now here's a little bit of a surprise maybe to some of you. Many of you have seen me do this whole thing before, so it's not a surprise to you, but I think, unless I miss my guess by a bunch, most people, if anybody's watching me right now, and if you're new to me doing this technique, see there's a mess of a different kind right there. A little Zorro zigzag. I think most artists would assume that I'm going to, because they know this is going to be a watercolor painting, they would assume that I'm going to do all of the pen and ink first and then color it, like coloring book technique that we all know and love, that we all grew up with. You do the outline first, you do drawing first, and then you color it. And here's the surprise. Once again, I think it's an early journey, first half of life, first half of journey versus second half. I'm not going to do that. Sometimes I I don't do any pen and ink at all. I go straight to watercolor, and then do pen and ink after the watercolor, which is very counterintuitive. Again, I think most people would say, what? You do the painting first? And the answer is yes. And why? Because my objective is not, what's the word, hardcore realism. My objective is not the picture. My objective is my chief objectives are abstract in nature. Line, shape, color, design, value, texture, right? So I'm going to draw for just a few more minutes. And I'm keeping the drawing kind of all in this range, in this part of the painting a little bit. I guess I'll do part of this window at least. So, in case you missed that, what with in the in the vomitous abundance of words, this guy talks too much. What I was trying to say was, I'm going to stop here shortly and paint, and then after the painting dries, I'll come back and do more pen and ink. So there's more of an interplay of the painting and drawing process. All right, so that I'm not doing too much drawing, and which results in, by the way, there's another one of those. Again, without my permission, my hand just made that mark. And as long as I can keep in that mode, not controlling it, but it happens without my permission, they usually turn out looking quite nicely. Very hard lesson for, I don't know if hard is the word, the transition from first half of Art Journey, where you're consumed with rendering stuff. And by the way, I hope you understand, I affirm this journey, this trajectory very much. I think it's a very good way to grow. Start out trying to render stuff, paint stuff, draw stuff that looks like stuff. Again, I said the other day, I think all college students should not even presume to get beyond that during their college career. I think college students should be taught how to draw and how to paint, period. Now, of course, they have a much more, as I did, they have a much more inflated view of their skills, generally speaking, than is warranted. So they go, no, I'm old, I'm mature enough to develop a style. And the fact is, there are some college students. I remember one in particular, he was a year ahead of me in college, and he was a decidedly old soul in a young body. So you all know some. Wouldn't want to be him at all. I mean, it did not look like a fun life. But he was just different, and unusual, and I have great respect for it. But I was not it. I was a good drawer, and I was learning to be a good drawer at the time. But I did know one artist who at age 22 was like, wow. He just comported himself in a manner more typical of a 45-year-old. And again, I don't even recommend that necessarily. It's something he could not have faked. All right. Either it was happening or it wasn't. All right, I'm done for now. Done drawing for the moment. Now let's take a minute to pull out my brushes. I'm using just, not for any good reason, I'm using my travel watercolor kit at the moment. I have my full watercolor kit is in a big box just 10 feet to my left, 8 feet to my left. But sometimes I just like the cozy little feel of not having, I mean, I have, as you know, I have a box, a drawer that's 8 by 16 inches maybe of every kind of brush imaginable. If you're a young artist, by the way, please do not be blown away by the amount of materials that I have. I think if I had watched myself when I was 20 years old, I think I would have been overwhelmed by the amount of art tools and art supplies I have. But I can answer that, explain that, I think in 2 words. 65 years old. It just happens. You don't have to make it happen. It just happens. You accumulate stuff, especially if it's your job and your profession. You know, everything I buy as a business, you know, deduction. It just happens. You don't have to have all this stuff. I'm glad I have it because I use it. Now, you know what? Although I just said that, that's the biggest brush I have in that box. All right, so forgive me just a minute. I'm gonna go over here to my bigger art kit. Pull up the drawer I was just talking about. So there's my mother of there's my big travel kit. I don't mean travel, but anyway, my big watercolor kit. And for this painting, I know I want one at least that big, but yeah, I do. I want a 3-inch brush out here. So there we go. I'm not sure that I'm going to use both of these, but I want them here at my left hand so that I can grab them in a moment if I so desire. By the way, I'm talking about having an abundance of materials, of tools. Actually, and again, it's all related to being old. Some of the stuff that I have because artists older than me died. Let's be honest here, and I'll do the same. I'll do the same for somebody when I quit working, either because I have no hands or no head, or I die. Some artist somewhere is going to make a boatload, or probably several artists. Is going to get a boatload of equipment, materials from me, and that has happened to me a couple of times. All right, so and I have here, I am using my medium-size watercolor kit. This was pretty much my only watercolor kit from 1972 is when I bought this. Think about it. How many years ago was that? 47 years ago. This got me all the way through college and all the way through my illustration career. I've since bought a bigger one, so that's now my middle size. Speaking of having too much equipment, I have a larger palette than that. If I want to grab it, I will. All right, I'm sitting here thinking of spray bottle, a couple spray bottles, a big one and a little one. I have lots of stuff because I'm old and I'm a professional artist. I'm old. Oh, you guys are laughing at each other. Let me see what you're saying here. That's true, Susan. The music thing, the Zen thing happened to me. Absolutely. Um, yes, Susan, you asked, do I need to let the ink dry? And yes, it is waterproof, but have I doubled my viewers? Oh yeah, 25. How about that? Hey gang, some of you are sitting there watching, being quiet. That's all right. Yep, yep. Michaels, stay away from it. You know, Michaels. When they have sales, they have good sales. But otherwise, stay away from Michaels. Oh, a couple months ago, I was doing a job out of town, and I discovered how utterly dependent I am on my local. My local's Jerry's Artarama store. Oh my goodness! I went to AC Moore, Michaels, and Hobby Lobby, all of which are fine establishments, but none of them had real art supplies that I needed. Boy, that was a challenge. All right, this brush is wet. I'm probably going to start with that 3-inch brush. The house, you guys can help me decide. It's a pale, and I don't think it's critical to my client, because I'm sure it's been painted since he lived there. But it's a pale bluish gray. That's a nice color. I'm not going to kill myself to capture that exactly. Okay, by the way, what you maybe can't see, I'm sitting here poised to spray. First thing I'm going to do is spray this paper. But the second thing I'm going to do is do some very broad painting, and I'm trying to decide which color and where. All right. It is going to be blue with a little bit of green in it, so bluish green. All right, so I think I'm ready to go now. So, all right, spray. And look at that. Wow. Look at how much the yellow just exploded off of there. That's kind of fun. It's a little bit too much of a good thing, but I'm not going to worry about that now. I have several minutes to modify that. By the way, another thing that I think is working for me personally in this technique is pick up some violet here, is because I know that my drawing is accurate and is going to be accurate. That frees me to apply watercolor with a greater freedom than is my normal inclination. Does that make sense? Because I know that the drawing is accurate, therefore I feel really free to paint, on an 8 by 10 inch painting with a 3-inch brush. You can see that's a pretty big brush for the. Now I'm about to pick up a tissue, just to answer. Some of you are going, what? What? Okay, don't panic too much. I've saved the lightest parts, other than what's bleeding in there. Okay, it's tissue time. Get rid of the glove for the moment. What do I want? Ooh, that roof turned out quite nicely, just as is. I'm going to lighten it a little bit though. And yes, I do have a little container of salt over there in my big kit. This might be a decent moment to sprinkle some salt and get a texture. Mightn't it? It might. I'm thinking about it, not convinced yet. I'm laughing because this is fun. This is you know, I'm congratulating myself a little bit because I'm thinking, dang, I almost look like a real watercolor painter. You know, one of those, I mean, watercolor, like every other medium, I guess, there are people who do just super hyper realistic watercolor. Watercolor is a very friendly medium for hyper realism. So is oil and acrylics, right? But generally speaking, the watercolorists who turn my head the most, saying nothing against those who do hyperrealism, like my good friend David Stickle, who I mention all the time. His ghost is, he's not dead, but his ghost is always over my shoulder. When I get ragging on hyperrealists, the ghost of David Stickle, my good friend, is always over my left shoulder saying, "Is that so, Dan? Oh, that's so, Dan. Oh, really? Oh." First of all, because he's a really nice guy. He's one of those guys that is, to me, he's so nice that he kind of makes you sick. Because I feel like a Philistine next to him. He's always so gentle and kind and smiling. You know, one of those kind of makes you sick kind of guys. Anyway, but generally speaking, the watercolorists who turn my head are more like the Alvaro Castanet. I think that's how he says it. He's from Uruguay. Uruguay. I can't say it. I don't do Spanish very well. Anyway, look him up. Alvaro. Alvaro C. Castanet. You can just get far. Google will finish it for you. They'll say, "Oh, you mean this guy?" He's probably my #1 favorite watercolorist in the world. Oh, there's a lot of others I like. Okay, hang on. Loud noise here for a minute. Sorry about that. By the way, I failed to mention that I am indeed working on arches, French, arche, 140 pounds, so it's not the real heavy stuff, but it is a block. It's you see the black? That's glue. It's glued all the way around the edge. So I've said other times that once you start painting on 300-pound, you usually don't want to go back to 140, but if you do have to go back to 140, at least make it on a block, so it's not turning into Grand Canyon when you're painting. All right, back to the noise. Hello, Vince. Thanks for speaking up. Barbara, thanks for welcoming newcomers. I think, Vince, you've spoken up before, haven't you? But it's been a while. I remember the YT2408, I think. Right. That's not quite dry. All right, it's, you know, I can feel slight moisture. So it's a dangerous time to paint in a way, because you have to remember that anything you put down is going to bleed, right? So you just have to keep that in mind. Don't put it down thinking that it's going to stay where you put it. And Ayal Art, whoops, you've spoken up in the past too. Good to have you on board. So I definitely can't do any pen and ink right. That would be a disaster. But what I can do, I think, is I can start doing some tones And again, you can see my palette, watercolor palette over here. A little bit, add more water to that. I mean, watercolor is such a different animal from acrylic, isn't it? And I've probably said this before. Acrylic and oil, I mean, for me, I think it's because my work these days is 90% or 80% oil painting. When I get a chance to do watercolor, it just feels so fun and relaxing to me. I always feel like I'm sort of, that's part of the reason my watercolor prices are quite inexpensive. If you want me to do watercolor for you, I'll send you a price list. You go, dang, those are cheap. And they are. I should finish this. I should be able to finish this painting. I don't know, I would think an hour and a half or something like that. And that's a little bit influences my my pricing. I know it's not supposed to influence it greatly. Anyway, back to Alvaro Castanet. Yeah, so I feel, you know, a little bit like, woo, I almost look like, I don't look like Alvaro, but I feel pretty free that I'm able to lay down some really loose watercolor washes and let them flow and not get too uptight about it, right? So I have here a very pale bluish purple, bluish violet, I guess, if I want to sound more intelligent, call it violet instead of purple. Oh heck, I don't care whether I sound very intelligent in that regard or not. That's what's on my brush. And again, I'm doing the color, I'm focusing on the color of the paint at the side of the house, and shading, shadow. Kind of doing both at the same time, but trying to be pretty free about it. Alvaro Castanet is coming to my fair city, to Raleigh, this summer, or this spring, I mean. And I was sincerely hoping I could afford to go take his class, but it's already full, and I didn't feel free committing myself to pay and letting my current finances. By the way, just for what it's worth, this has been a really rough year for me. My wedding count, my wedding paintings went way down. I don't know why. I am working on it. I'm trying to get it back up. I'm working on some SEO stuff, trying to get it. But anyway, but it's been turned into a really challenging year because of that. I just tell you that because you're my friends, and you might find it interesting. You might get a good laugh. Oh boy. So I didn't sign up for Alvaro Castanet, even though my dear friend Monica from Venezuela is the administrator of what has turned into, I think without doubt, has turned into the #1 venue in our area for art classes. I get such a kick, and I tell her this every time I see her. Monica and I were in a very special gallery for a number of years, now going on about a couple years ago, 3 years ago, maybe it closed. It was the most community gallery I've ever been a part of. It was a true community. It was just delightful, and that's because of the leader, our friend Gary, who was the mastermind behind it. It was just delightful in so many respects. And Monica became a part of that. I got to know her there. And while we had this gallery down in Cary, which is like a suburb of, sort of Raleigh, she started administrating art classes. And the reason I get a kick out of it is just Monica is just this sweet, cute, forgive me, Monica, if you're hearing me, she'll never hear me probably, but you know, if it sounds like an offensive term. But she's just this cute, sweet, sort of diminutive, you know. You would think, oh, she's just something, and it turns out she's just a monster. I say that with the utmost respect, in her ability to administrate art classes. So my goodness, if she single-handedly pretty much doesn't have the most famous artists from all over the world coming and teaching classes in our little Raleigh, North Carolina. And as you can tell, it just tickles me to death. And I say that with absolutely fawning respect, as you can tell. Here I am. This is me fawning, in case you wondered what it looked like. This is me fawning. It's like, Monica, you go, girl. You're just an inspiration to us all. If you know what I mean? She just comes across like one of those, I don't know, sweet ladies that is just good at being pretty and sweet, you know? If that sounds offensive to you, my point is, she's not. The point is, she's just, as I say, the highest compliment. She's just a monster businesswoman, and it just tickles me to death. I just love it, because I didn't expect that, you know, when I first met her. Anyway, hats off. Huge kudos to my dear friend Monica. All right, hang on a second. I'm speaking monitors. I've got a monitor dying in my ear, so I got to switch to new ones so I can. That's kind of pretty, though, don't you think? Don't you think? That's kind of pretty. Coming along. Now, I may not broadcast. Oh, I don't have any monitor. I can see that I think you can still hear me. Barbara, have you been here for a workshop? Really? Hey, Lynn. Oh, good to have you on board. Romper room. That is hilarious. Yeah, I do hope it's just a lull. Lynn, was that Lynn who said that? Sorry. Yeah. You know, I mean, by hook or by crook, I've been paying my bills. Hang on just a second. I need to switch monitors again, because for some reason I'm not getting any sound there. I hope it is temporary as well. Next year seems to be shaping up better than this year was. Okay, new monitor. Let's see if this one works. If it doesn't, I'll quit. I'll quit messing around. There we are. All right. Ooh, high volume. Let's turn that down. All right. So I'm just about to a point. Yeah, and maybe I should pause this broadcast, because I'm just about to the point where I want to come back in and do my second layer of pen and ink. So my approach is, I want to go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth between the watercolor and the ink stuff, because there are areas where it turns out I don't need to do line work. I will tell you who, at least one person that influenced me in this regard 25 years ago. I've talked about him before. My dear friend who's passed away, sadly, and I did not inherit any of his materials since that subject came up earlier this morning. He died and didn't leave anything to me. What? Oh, that is rude, rude, rude. That's because he left Raleigh, left us, moved to California, and from there moved to England, passed away in England. So anyway, that's why I didn't get any of his stuff. Oh boy, that is really crass. I'm sorry, I didn't expect that to come out. I don't want you to know how crass I am. I just want to be crass without you knowing it. You know what I mean? Anyway, Neil Watson. Look him up. Google him. Tragically, here's a weird thing about the moment in history in which we are living. People who died over 10 years ago, you can't find them on the internet very often because they didn't have much of an internet presence, because they died before having an internet presence was a thing. That's really, I have no idea what's going to happen, when I die. Will my stuff just little by little fade? I'm assuming it'll fade. Or will they go through, will it some technological revolution that will make everything that's currently on the internet archaic, out of date? That might be too. Anyway, it doesn't matter. You can barely find, but if you search, you can find my dear old friend Neil Watson. He was a very highly skilled hand surgeon in England, moved to the United States in the late 80s or early 90s, late 80s, I think, and gave up his medical practice completely to become a full-time artist. That's really unusual. And was quite successful, made a splash, got into some national magazines, and lived here in Raleigh, and actually influenced me to no small degree. I'm very thankful for his influence. And his medium was, in fact, pen and ink and watercolor. And probably more than anyone else, he's the one who's influenced me in this regard. And he would do things like this. He would go back and forth, ink, paint, ink, paint, ink, paint, and not overdoing it in either the paint or the ink category, because of going back and forth. Anyway, so I very much, you can look him up. One of our community did that a couple years ago. Actually looked up and helped me find out what had happened to him and when he had passed away. So I think there's a few new people watching today. That's nice. Welcome. Good to have you on board. You're welcome to stay quiet. But if you want a bunch of friendly people to say hi to you, then speak up, and they will. I was going to say, those of you, if there's newcomers, you have stumbled on, even though there are not a ton of people watching, as you can see, we have this crazy community. I say that with great affection. This crazy little community has developed on my channel. Most of the people that are watching have turned into old friends, so therefore they laugh at each other and greet each other and so on. So if you greet us, we'll greet you back. Okay, Neil Watson. Yeah, take a little break. Go look him up. Again, you have to search a bit because he's not well represented on the internet, but you can find some of his stuff, and well worth a little search. All right, I'm going to switch to a bristle brush, which I had stuck this end in a pencil sharpener, so I have a very useful wooden point, which is very, as you probably know, very helpful for watercolor painting. And I'm going to lift out some stuff. Why a bristle brush? Because it's stiffer, right? So I can get a little bit more rubbing action. hang on, I need to get a different water jug. I'm having to stretch too much for that one. Bear with me. You hear the rummaging, don't you? I don't have a sink right here in my studio, my upstairs studio. I have one down the hall and in the laundry room. It's close enough. All right. Here's my water. I want this right close at hand. I want to do some lifting out. Now, if I wanted to do some serious lifting out, then I might go get my magic eraser, Mr. Clean Magic Eraser. Right? Are you guys familiar with that? Let me grab it, just because you should, if you do any watercolor at all. And this is a fairly new invention. I don't know when they invented it, but now I'm looking for it. Come on, come on, come on. It's right around here somewhere. Here's one. All right, I got a couple. Here's what they look like. Mr. Clean Magic Erasers. And they will lift almost everything off a watercolor page. It works, it looks like a sponge, it feels like a sponge, but it actually behaves very much like an eraser. In other words, you have to rub as if it were eraser, and the sponge crumbles and disintegrates essentially as you do the rubbing. Does that make sense? It took me a while to figure out, how does this thing work? This thing doesn't work, but it does. And I won't demonstrate it right now, but you can take, say, some good masking tape like this and mask off a little area and then rub real hard, so to speak, in whatever's the masking tape is left exposed, right? And you can go almost perfectly back to white paper. Now, please understand, if you're a new watercolor painter, that anytime you abuse watercolor paper that vigorously, you're going to lose surface integrity. That is to say, the paper where you, like what I'm doing right now, is actually abusive of the paper, but it doesn't matter. In other words, if after this dries and I run a brush across this area that I just rubbed out, it won't behave. The watercolor on the surface of paper won't behave exactly the same way it would have if it were a piece of unmolested watercolor paper. But it's perfectly fine with me. It doesn't matter that it doesn't behave in the same way. But I just want to let you know, in case you're a beginner to watercolor, that there is a price to be paid for rubbing or lifting out. It's not a, what's the word? Get out of jail free. It's not a free. There are consequences anytime you do this kind of thing. So you just calculate and see, is it worth it? In this case, of course, yeah, totally. Not to worry a bit. Not gonna. But this is starting to look kind of nice, isn't it? There's some light effects happening here. The most important aspect of any painting is what? Play of light. You know what? Turns out I am going to do the exact thing I was just talking about. This is turning into such nice watercolor feel. I want some of that happening on this railing over here. So I am, in fact, going to. You have to be careful, by the way, about putting masking tape down on wet watercolor paper, because it can come back to bite you. It can, when you pull it off, it can pull paper. And likewise, again, please understand, if you're new to watercolor, that simply by putting tape down on the paper, I am also, at a, I suppose at a molecular level, but at a, I am altering the paper. So again, that's not without some cost. But here we go. So I'm going to do exactly what I just said to you. So here's my Mr. Clean Magic Eraser. And if I rub too hard, if I rub hard enough, I will actually not only make the watercolor disappear, but actually make the ink. So you know, if it removes India ink from watercolor paper, that it's a pretty stout, it's a pretty strong effect. There we go. I think that's enough. Let me remove this carefully. There we go. Oh, isn't that bright? Ooh, that's nice. And now after that dries, I'll come back into that area and do more painting on top of it, so it won't have quite the starkness that it has right now. But what I do like, and again, of course, you guys can't see my head or my eyes, but my eyes are I'm like a bobblehead. I'm looking at the reference and looking at my painting back and forth, and you can see where I was encouraged to do that light, because the photograph, I mean, I would do it even if the photograph didn't necessarily suggest it to me, but in this case, I'm fortunate in that the photograph does in fact indicate such a thing. Okay, just since now that I've got my Mr. Clean eraser in my hand, I'm going, well, wait a minute, that was pretty fun. Let's do some more of that right there. I don't know why I go into that voice at times like that, but there you go. I'm trying to erase a little drop of ink. Those of you who were with me 15 minutes ago, I picked up a rapidograph pen, opened it, and it dripped. And the dot wasn't really that bad, but yeah. Dang. I should just sign it, be done. That's not true. But it's taking on a life of its own, which is always nice. You know, beyond what came out of my head. Do you know what I mean? That's good painting, when it supersedes what you planned or thought or did on purpose. In my opinion, that's good painting. Oil, acrylic, drawing, watercolor, any one of those. When what ends up on the page is better than what you had, so to speak, planned, then that's some good painting right there, in my opinion. Ghost of David Stickle notwithstanding. He has no idea we talk about him so much over here. One of you guys is gonna send him an email and say, David, do you know that Dan Nelson talks about you all the time? All right, that makes me, I have to tell my favorite David Stickle story. I've told this before, but it's been a while, so this is my channel. I'm going to tell you again. We were in the same gallery that I just mentioned a little while ago that I met Monica. David and I were in that same gallery, and several times I had said in his presence, you know, like to a customer or one of our fellow artists, I would point at. So David does beautiful, beautiful, hyper-realistic watercolors. And I pointed at his work several times and said, yeah, I used to paint like that, and I took pills and got over it. Now, the only reason it was even mildly humorous, which I'm not claiming it was like a gut buster or anything like that, but it was mildly funny because there's a degree of truth in it. Again, you can still see it. Go to danelsonart.com and look at my illustrations and look at some of my watercolor illustration. You go, oh yeah, you did some. Or go to paintings and click on the watercolor folder. There you go. And you will see there some pretty, realistic stuff by me. So the only reason it was mildly funny is because there was a grain of truth in it. Because in fact, in my earlier years, I did a lot more quite realistic watercolor. So I had said that several times, and one day I said that, and he smiled, and he pointed at one of my paintings on the wall there in the gallery. And he said, yeah, well, I used to paint like that. Of course, I was in 6th grade. I did. I am so feeble-minded that I laugh every time I tell that story. That's a sign of some lack of intelligence, I'm sure, that you laugh at the same joke over and over. But, oh my goodness, I just rolled. I said, David, don't ever stop giving that line. It's just too good. Yeah, well, I used to paint like that. Of course, I was in 6th grade. Oh, my goodness. So there you go. I hope I've got you curious enough to go look up David Stickle. By the way, I do have a serious, what's the word? David Stickle instructional comment. And often when I'm judging a show, say, or when I'm in a critique group or something, in a way, again, because he's not the only one. I also know Jeff Jacobs. I have to look up, make sure I've got that name right. He's another North Carolina watercolorist who does hyper-realistic stuff. A former illustrator out of New York City who's retired in North Carolina, and he and I were in the same gallery for a while. He's a nice guy. I enjoy his work a lot. But again, hyper-realistic watercolor. And anyway, when I do have a word of counsel to anybody, if you have a inclination to do hyper-realistic, anything but watercolor in particular, do not make the mistake, as I see this, I see David is my example of what to do. And I point people to him often because in the course of judging shows and so forth, many times come across people who are doing a almost super realistic watercolor. And the what's the word? They stop short of hyperrealism, not because, as I do, at least because of abstract concerns. I describe myself as as a abstract realist painter in my acrylic oil painting. So the abstract issues are paramount over the realism issues. And I would like to say that I would like to claim that my watercolors are the same thing. Anyway, but some people, I don't get the feeling that they stop short of hyperrealism because they want their abstraction to shine. They stop short of hyperrealism because of laziness. Because after a while, it just gets really monotonous, right? That realism takes time. It's like doing a 5,000 piece jigsaw puzzle. I mean, this is not for the faint of heart. It takes a long time. And that to me, like almost hyper-realistic watercolor is a really bad place to land. You don't want to, in my opinion, you do not want to do that. You don't want to end just inches from the finish line. And there's actually, I will leave this person unnamed, but he's possibly the most well-known watercolorist in North Carolina. He's published a whole bunch of like coffee table books. He will remain unnamed by me. But my heart always goes out to him a little bit because I go, oh man, You're so close to super realism, but you stopped, 3 feet short of the goal line, and you need to take notes from somebody like David Stickle and say, no, man, if you're going to get that close, so this is the art teacher in me, say if you're going to get that close to super realism, do not stop just a few inches from the goal line. No, you need to, every blade of grass, every stone, if you're doing that kind of thing. And again, look at David Stickle's stuff, because I think he's a great example of the way to do it. You've got to, once you've obligated, once you've established that that is the world you're going to work in, you don't stop just short of the goal. All right? So, and again, David Stickle, my good buddy, is who I usually point to and say, go take notes, look at Dave Stickle's work, and do what he does. Don't stop just short of the goal just because you got tired, which is frankly, what most people, that's why most people don't do hyperrealism of any medium, is because it's boring. It takes too long, right? All right, that's enough of that. Let's get on to another subject. We might even talk about how my painting is coming along. Nah. I think partly I'm continuing to paint here because, so this might be bad news. It might be because you guys are watching me, and I hate to interrupt our nice flow to let everything dry, but I think I'm gonna have to do that. I think I might be letting the cart, get before the horse here. Is that the right expression? Yeah. Because I do want to let this dry so that I can come back. It's time for me to start doing some pen and ink again. Oh, just for what it's worth, I'm very likely to use one of these kind of pens or something like this. A felt tip, manufactured felt tip pen. Now, I say this all the time, I'm going to repeat it. It says professional, waterproof, technical pen. Listen to me, if you're a beginner or if you don't know, don't trust this word waterproof. You test it, because not every, I don't know what they mean, I don't know how they can get away with that, but not every pen that is labeled waterproof really is. So I don't know what they mean. I don't know, maybe they mean if you let it dry, overnight, then it's waterproof. I don't know. But anyway, this is the School of Hard Knocks talking to you right now. So don't trust it. You test it first. And that pen that I just showed you, I believe, well, I use it all the time. I know it's waterproof. Be that as it may, I am going to test it again before I start using it here on this painting. Okay, so this pen, this is a 0.02 whatever millimeter or something like that. It's quite fine. You can get finer, but not easily. While that's drying, just a quick oh, good. You guys, let me back up. You guys are doing some talking. Oh, what fun! No, hey man, hang on. So there's so many. What? You guys are chatting up a storm, and I've missed it. All the way back to Uncle, who's binge watching, from doctor to full-time artist. Wow, yeah. Love that shadow coming across the roof. Susan, thank you. Me too. Yeah, Barbara will welcome. That's true. That's true. Uncle 60 says, an artist who do medical procedures so well that his drawings, not his drones, his drawings became a method to save babies from some kind of blue disease. No kidding. Wow. We were wondering how drones would save babies and carry them away. Uh, oh, you guys. Okay, Julian, good to hear. Good to hear from you. A mostly quiet viewer. Well, thanks for speaking up, Julian. Glad you enjoy our little community here. Appreciate it. See, a whole bunch of people greet you. That's just the way it is around here. Exactly, Susan. You're talking about the messing up the surface of the paper, right? And Uncle Six is Vivian Theodore Thomas. Was an African-American laboratory supervisor. Oh, wow. So she, is that a woman, I presume, right? Did such good illustrations. Oh, his work. So it is a his, maybe. Lynn Beasley, another quiet one. Thank you. And Monique speaks up from the Netherlands. Huh, that's a good question. Yeah, no, I don't know. I think that watercolor it gives itself really. It's a fiddler's paradise. Don't you? But I guess oil painting is too. I don't know, but I mean it's just so easy here, and that's why for me it's a sitting down medium. You know, I'm just going to fiddle. All right, let me stop. And yeah, this is, you can feel the coolness. You know what I mean? It's not. My hand's not blotting up paint, but I can feel coolness. And I really have to get this dry, and I hate the sound of a hair dryer on a broadcast. So forgive me. Even though I've got a fair number of viewers at the moment, for my channel, 23 is a fair number. Woohoo! Breaking records here. I'm going to pause, and I'm going to tell you guys it's going to be 5 minutes. Okay? So go run to the bathroom or something. Maybe I'll do that. I'll be back in 5 minutes when this is dry. Okay? Thanks. Bye. All right. 8 minutes. I know I could mute the sound. That's an idea. Maybe I should have done that, Susan. Anyway, I had time to go warm up my coffee, literally. I don't usually drink coffee at 5 p.m. This day has just flown by. This is one of those beautiful days for being indoors. Cold and rainy outside. Well, not too cold, but drizzly. And so here's that test I was talking about. I just made some marks with this pen. It bleeds a tiny bit, not worth mentioning. All right, so I'm good. Woo! So back to drawing now, and with a different. I could use a fountain pen if I wanted to, if I want heavy lines. But at the moment, that doesn't feel right to me. They are just some real feathery, spidery kind of lines, almost not visible. First of all, for rendering the clapboard. I'm just saying that to drive you English majors crazy. I believe it's clabbered. That is so weird. Clabbered. And my wife, who was just home from her errands, insisted that I eat leftovers of her lunch. So I hope you can't hear me chewing. So same rules as always. I'm using the pen, of course, to achieve a degree of realism. But more important than realism is flair. texture. I don't know what else to call it. You know, I do acknowledge that I had a very distinct advantage in life, in that my dad was a very good painter. He was never professional, but he was quite good, and my respect for his skill level has actually increased quite over the decades. He's been gone for 12 years now. And the most distinct skill I think that he had, looking back in hindsight, and I recognized it to a degree as a young man, but it's just I've grown, is that this whole concept that I talk about so often of interesting marks. And if I use, in years past, I've used the term a mature hand. And well, that's what he had. Quite unusual for an amateur. I clearly remember, there's no question in my mind, when I graduated at age 23, the smart ones get through quicker. When I graduated as an art major at age 23 years old. So after, you know, I've been making money as an artist for a good 5 years at that point, and had waded through the rigors of being an art major. He would still draw or paint occasionally. He was never what's the word, highly productive. He was a busy man, didn't have time to do a lot of artwork. But he had a hand. He had a mature hand. His marks were decidedly better than mine. I don't think I even really started to catch up. Forgive me, y'all, won't you? Forgive me while I brag about my dad for a minute. I don't think my hand really started to catch up until I was in my mid-30s. So for me, as a young man, to be able to see marks kind of like this as good was probably gave me a head start. I had that same thought, Susan. This is not decaf. I hope I'm okay. All right, what else do I want to draw? I certainly don't want to get into the trap of drawing all the shingles or all the bricks or all the clapboard, right? But I want to do a little bit. I want to give the impression so maybe focusing mostly here in the shadow. That's enough of that. Don't want to do too much more of that. I'm thinking, sitting back, looking and thinking right now. All right, I think I'm ready to go back to watercolor now, and I'm getting pretty close to finished with this painting, as you can probably see. What am I missing? Well, have you heard my expression? Beware the Barbara Streisand syndrome when you're doing a watercolor. Oh boy, this is really bad. It shows my age. But you remember that you remember that song? Misty watercolor memories. Okay, there's a reason that whoever wrote that song, that they called it Misty Watercolor Memories of the Way We Were. That's the name of the song, The Way We Were. And the reason is because way too many people's experience of watercolors is that they're misty. And of course, not the good watercolors, just the ones that your grandma did. Oh, sorry. Whew, that was nasty. Whew, that was low. No. So, indeed, it is true that way too many watercolors are in fact misty, and so you want to watch out for that. And so, and there's a real simple reason why that's the case. There are two mediums. English majors, quiet. There are two reasons. There are two mediums that are a challenge to get 8, 9, 10 values, right? Using, and 8, 9, 10s are the darks. And the two mediums are watercolor and graphite, or charcoal. I'm treating those as essentially subsets of the same thing. Pencil and watercolor. Why? Because in both cases, you have to build up pretty much with watercolor. You can do it in one fell swoop, but not usually. Usually to get dark watercolor, you've achieved that because you've built up several layers of watercolor, getting darker and darker and darker, usually. And again, usually too many times watercolors just fail to stick with the program long enough to achieve dark values. So that's what I'm going to do right now, is just make sure that I've got sufficient darks, because I do not want to fall into the Barbara Streisand syndrome. Very few of you knew that she did watercolors. So let's make sure that I've got adequate darks. So that I don't end up with a painting that is misty, that doesn't have what's the word? Strong range of values. It's not the words, the right words, but that'll do. And part of the reason we want most paintings to contain or reflect a full range of values is because the lights in our paintings, and of course, the most important aspect of any painting, of course, is including watercolors, is play of light, right? That's the most important thing, is play of light. And the lights in a painting, they are only relative to the darks. They're only light in to the degree that the darks in your painting are dark, right? So if you don't have sufficient darks, then you won't have the impression of sufficient lights either. So I want to push the darks a little bit so that my lights will jump out. I'm fairly happy with the play of light that I have here in the painting at this moment, but I want to just push it a little bit further. And because I call this a watercolor sketch, and because I give myself the freedom of cheating in so many respects, I also give myself permission to use opaque white, or sometimes even opaque color. I think on this particular painting, I can get away with just a little bit of opaque white. I think will be adequate. And I already mentioned today my favorite watercolor painter, Alvaro Castanet, and he cheats. He uses opaque white, which always makes me laugh, kind of, because he's breaking the. I think he's my favorite in the whole world. And he cheats. It's hilarious. So if you can paint as good as Alvaro Castanet, you can do whatever you want. Again, I encourage you to go look him up if you're not familiar with his work. You'll probably if you have eyes in your head, you'll be blown away, as I am. Okay, tell you what, I'm going to make noise with a hairdryer, and I'm going to. All right, we back? Yeah, we are. Thank you. And Karen has a question. Is your dark black? No. Do I have it? No. I don't. Here's, whoops, that's dangerous, isn't it? Here's all the colors. There is a Payne's gray in here, and I might have used some of that. But most of it, I actually mixed up my darkest by doing purple and green, like a viridian green and a dioxazine violet, something like that. That's what most of that dark stuff was. It's a very good question, Karen. If that's what you're asking, I'm assuming it is. All right, I have to do some. I want to do some blue in the sky. As I was drawing my painting there, I realized, you know what, my painting is rather monochromatic, and I'm not going to fight that too much because I'm fairly happy with the monochromatic treatment view, but I want to think about, well, wait a minute, is there some easy ways to get color in here to expand the the color palette? And indeed, the blue sky accomplishes that. Do I want any more blue? Indeed, I might on the front of the house itself, on the the paint of the house, and I think I do just a tiny bit of blue. Oh, and I left my shutters. I haven't painted the shutters at all, so I'll come in here and do some darken those. Probably just a dark neutral. In the photograph, they're actually gray. Yeah, that's all right. Now I think that leaves me room to bring in some real bright yellow chartreuse here on this sunny part of the grass down here. Yeah. Oh, I know. Here we go. Here we go. This is what I need. Is just some the bricks, the yellow-orange bricks, can be considerably more colorful than they are right now. So that will give us some nice little pop of color in here. Yep, same thing up here on the chimney. All right, that gives me a little bit wider color spectrum. I'm sitting here and thinking, I want to draw in real loosely some bushes down here, because that's in America, in North Carolina, there'll always be foundation bushes there and over here. So I want to add that. I think I like this large rest area here with no texture in there. It gives us a nice contrast to some of the busyness elsewhere. I think I'm ready to go then to some opaque gouache. So I usually keep a tube or two of fresh gouache paint here in my drawer. I think I have another tube, I think, if I run of this, but let's use this up first. Oh yeah, there we go. Plenty. To the point of waste, actually. All right. I can do this without waiting for the painting to dry completely. This will not bleed. It will bleed if the painting is wet enough. I don't mean to mislead you, but I know how wet my painting is, and it's not so. All right, now where do I want to do this? And one of the questions is, do I really want to use a pure white? Let me think about it. Let me zoom in. You can help me decide. See, that really does pop. I think it's all right. I think I'm going to proceed a little bit. The question is, would I want to add a tiny bit of pale yellow or orange to this, just to warm it up? I'm going to proceed though for a moment in thinking that I'm going to like the rather stark white popping. I've mentioned this before, it's a good time to mention it again. If you are ever doing watercolor and you're cheating the way I'm cheating here, now I'm not advocating this like for getting in a American Watercolor Society competition or anything like that, but just for the purposes of completing a satisfactory painting. If you want to obscure the fact that you used an opaque paint, which sometimes you do just to make it look more cohesive. One real convenient trick that you can use is after you've done the white, you can do a real careful wash, one stroke wash on top of the white. Does that make sense? I don't mean covering the whole thing, but you can do a wash across part of the white, and that will push, diminish the starkness or the edge of this. Now, I don't think I'm going to bother doing that in this painting. I think the glow that I'm achieving with this little bit of opaque white is quite satisfactory and appropriate. So I'm not going to worry about it a bit, I don't think. I'm sitting back and, well, while I'm thinking, let's take care of these. Let's take care of these shutters. I'm just using this much too small of a brush for my taste, but I'm using it because it's what's in my hand right now. So, ooh, you know what? I do want to do something other than a pure white. I'm going to mix up a small amount of. Well, so you can see what I'm doing. Mixing up a small amount of bluish gray. No, I didn't think I would do any opaque color at all, but see, turns out I am. Yeah, that looks nice. in the photograph, this front door is yellow, but I'm doing this painting for a man who grew up in this house some time ago, and I doubt very much that the door was yellow. He didn't say anything about it, but I doubt very much that the door was yellow when his family lived there. So I don't feel obligated to do the yellow door. So I've left it more neutral. It has a slight yellow cast to it, but I will send a good photograph of this painting to him, and as always, of course, he will have the opportunity to make edits if he feels the need. Mixing up a little bit more neutral gray, slightly less blue. Just a few marks here that I don't even want them to be discernible necessarily. My guess is that non-artist, a person who's not a painter, would not even be able to identify these marks as paint. Do you know what I mean? As opaque. Pretty much only a fellow artist would even recognize that. Oh, and there was one other. So here we go. One bad turn deserves another. I'm now mixing up a pale green because, in fact, I do want to indicate a little bit of a few leaves on this tree. There, that's probably good enough right there. Okay, a little bit of bushes here. I will admit that this tendency to creep, you know, I think at first that I'm not going to do any opaque stuff, and then I do some opaque white, and then I go, oh, I'll do a little bit of color, and then I do a little more and a little more. I will admit that has happened to me perhaps more than once in my life. Don't tell anybody I said that, though. What do you think? Hello, Lily. Thank you for that. How many brushes do I usually use? This is gouache. Where's the tube? Yeah, I buy this on a frequent basis. It's just I don't want to run out of it. Of course, I can re-wet some dry gouache. It's in my gouache tray, right? But that's a nuisance, and it never seems to get quite as opaque as it does fresh out of the tube. Here we are, more creeping. You know what I mean by that? In much of life, you know, we start out thinking one thing, and then little by little, we end up doing something different than we expected. That's what I mean by creep here. So. Yeah, but that looks better right there. That's why we creep sometimes. Not just because we're creepy, but because it looks good. All right, I think I better quit while I'm ahead. Well, I'll tell you what, let's do the fun unveiling. This is always a little bit like Christmas to take the wrapping off and see how it actually looks. The order here was for an 8 by 10 inch painting, so I've done 8 1/8 or 8 1/16 by 10 1/16. And whoever frames this painting, they can either decide to keep this edge or discard it. Their choice completely. And I will sign it then down in this corner because that corner's a little busy. So I'll finish, quote unquote, at this point. And as you may know, it's always really nice to be able to hang on to a painting for a day or two, look at it tomorrow with fresh eyes, and see if I want to change anything. It's very, very possible that'll be the case. So there it is, pulled off its block. And maybe I'm all done. Thanks, you guys, for your company and your chat. The chimney does have bricks, indeed. You think it ought to have lines? Yeah, I would. I'm being kind of silly. I don't mind a few lines. Yep. Just for fun, show you the photo versus the painting, right? I will probably post both of these on my community page, on my YouTube community, so you can see. I would like other artists, I would like all other artists to do this. Show us the photograph and show us your painting, because it's so, I feel like it's so instructive. You can learn so much by seeing what an artist has done. I think this photograph was, you know, for a quick snap shoot with my phone was a pretty good photograph. By the way, all this down here, I don't know if you can tell, is me. I photoshopped out, you know, a car and a couple of trash bins and so forth, just real quickly, just so it wouldn't be in the way. But I hope you can see that I've taken that and made play of light is far and away the most important aspect of a painting, and I think that I've accomplished that, at least to some degree, here in this painting. I say that and then I keep fiddling. I just saw, you know what? Even though I like that orange color, I want to lighten it up just a little bit in a few places. There we go. That's better. All right. Now I'm fiddling and meandering, so I will bid you a fond adieu. Thank you, Susan. Appreciate that. Thank you, all of you guys, for your company and your fun and your friendship. Appreciate it. I don't know what I'm doing tomorrow, but hopefully I'll broadcast. All right. Thanks. Bye. Don't forget to hit like if you like it. If you don't like it, keep that to yourself. All right, bye.